Hello, it's Jack Tutor here from Attention Magazine. Welcome to the Crucial Listening podcast, where I speak to experimental musicians and sound artists about the records that are important to them. My guest this time is Richard Youngs, a musician based in Glasgow, who I've been listening to for some time and never ever fails to subvert my expectation or really enthrall and surprise me with every record I hear of his. And he's so prolific as well. Quite how someone manages to release so much material while consciously and constantly seeming to question their own practice and what they're capable of. All while having a family. It's incredible. Richard also put on one of the few live shows that my partner and I have both been able to see and both been able to enjoy equally. He did a wonderful show at Cafe Otto. Also present was Eric Chenot, and both were brilliant. So Richard's choices, his 3 records, were in keeping with the subversions of expectations I've experienced throughout his back catalogue as a composer. There were some real surprises in here, and it was so great to dig down into the rationale behind these 3 releases. So, as per the show notes, you can find out more about Richard at nofansrecords.com. He makes reference at the start. We begin this conversation by talking about a record on the horizon called This Is Not a Lament, which is a double album featuring solo and collaborative works. At least the collaborative side, at least, is based on pibroch music, which is a form of technically virtuosic bagpipe music. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Please, if you haven't already, we're starting to accumulate episodes now. So subscribe and check out the 3 previous to this one. If you want to find out more information about Richard or the albums he chooses, head over to attentionmagazine.co.uk/crucial listening. I'll have all the information there. And if you like as well, give this podcast a 5-star rating. Help me boost it up the charts, because this is definitely the kind of thing you want to see at number 1. Without further ado, here's my interview with Richard Youngs.
My brain, deep fried life, can't remember holidays, thoughts as furniture, 'cause I got summer through my mind. I got summer through my mind. I've got summer through my mind. I've got summer.
Richard Youngs, welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on. So,
Pleasure.
I've asked you, like I do with all my guests, to come forth with 3 records that you consider to be important to you. Just to kick off, I'd be intrigued to know how you found that process. I've got a really interesting array of responses from people, I guess, enlightening me to the process they went through, the motives they had for picking important records, and it sounds like you could have quite easily picked 3 entirely different ones. So how was that for you?
Totally. I mean, you asked me and I came up with 3. If you asked me now, I'd come up with another 3, but I'm sticking with my original 3. I'm not deviating in any way. We're just going to go with it.
I'm glad my research still stands then. No,
I could totally throw you here and say, well, actually,
yeah. So I've just seen the last couple of days you've put out an announcement for another album, which I think actually you referred to as your most ambitious yet, which for someone with such a vast discography is quite something to hear. But would you mind telling me about that? I mean, it sounds like a really interesting work.
Well, I've I really like pibroch, which is bagpipe music, and it's particularly a form of bagpipe music. It's on the whole, very long compositions, degree of improvisation in the middle, and yes, it's an album based on pibroch. I say based; it's very loose. Having said that, there is someone on it who is a professional bagpiper who really knows his pibroch, Donald W.G. Lindsay, extraordinary player. But for the most part, it was me asking friends who I thought could bring something to the project to be part of it. Originally, I'd done a solo record of pibroch. What I saw as pibroch, very loose. I don't play bagpipes. Oh, if you played this to anyone in the know, they'd say that isn't pibroch. But in my mind, there's somewhere where it is connected, as I say, very loose. So I'd recorded the solo album, and then Richo at Fourth Dimension said to me, how about this? I release a double CD by you. One is a solo disc and the other is collaborations. Now, I'd already got the solo disc sorted, and I thought, well, collaborations, people whose music, to me, have an element of pibroch, or they're pibroch fans. And actually, the collaborations got a bit out of hand, and some of them have bled into the solo disc as well. So the whole thing kicks off with... I collaborated with Alistair Roberts, who I approached because I thought, well, hey, you know a bit about folk music. And he took my ideas to a whole new place. And he said, well, my friend Donald is a bagpiper. He has an extraordinary sideline in 3D printing electric bagpipes, but that's another story.
Wow.
So he does play electric bagpipe on this as well as traditional bagpipe, and we recorded him, and then Alistair and I took what he had done, and Alistair recorded some separate stuff, and I recorded the notes of the pibroch scale in multi-tracked voices, and then we played the scale I'd done, a bit like 10cc's I'm Not in Love, you know, the way they created that choir out of different notes of the octave, and they played the choir like sort of a very, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, no, I have heard that. Yeah, it's quite striking.
It was a bit like that, and we combined that with Donald's playing and some of Alistair's recordings, and out of that came 20 minutes of music, so already we'd kind of gone completely off the beaten track. I also asked... shall I go through who I asked? There's Neil Campbell on there. He's a big pibroch fan, so I had to ask him. There's a Dutch artist friend called Sibrin Renemer, who earned most of his living, I think, as a saxophone busker, but he at one point was a professional Mongolian overtone singer. So I got him to do some overtone singing because I felt it was... it was a good underlying drone for some pibroch.
Yeah, wow.
There's Alistair Galbraith, who I've always felt has had a bit of a pibroch edge to his music. It's hard to pin that down why, but I felt that. And he provided some violin playing along with a couple of friends as a backing band, and it coincidentally fitted in with some electric kazoo I'd recorded, so they just got slammed alongside each other. There's Simon Wickham Smith, who I've long collaborated with, and I know he's very interested in long form music, so I thought he'd be a great contender. And he sent me some digitally stretched voice, which I then set up in a sort of interaction with a bass drone, and it all seemed to work very well. There's Oren Ambachi. Last time I saw him play live, I thought there was a real bagpipe quality to his guitar playing.
Totally.
So I said, well, how about it? And we recorded two things independently for the same backing track, which was a virtual bagpipe piece I'd recorded, and then we dropped out the virtual bagpipe piece, and hey, we got a new work just like that. There's my godson, Norifumi Shimagawa, who plays the cello, and I wrote out on a piece of paper the notes of a pibroch scale, and I asked him just to play any note on that scale as long as he could, draw it out, and then just move on to another random one. And he did that, and then I improvised some analog synthesizer over it. So you're beginning to get the picture that every track is really quite different. And at this stage, I'm beginning to think, have I missed anyone out? Who else have we got? And let me just see. I think I've probably mentioned everyone. I hope I have.
Well, it sounds fascinating, and I think a couple of episodes back on this podcast, I was speaking to Lawrence English, who discussed with me about the process of making his most recent album, which I think was a quite a delve into collaboration for him to an extent that he hadn't really explored before. And what was really fascinating to listen to, and again, which I'm getting with you, is just that you end up with this compendium of experiences and interactions, which account for tiny, like, wonderful little narratives in and of themselves, as well as kind of centering on this central concept. So
yeah, well, I particularly felt like these people could really bring something to the project. And likewise, I did my last song-based album, The Rest is Scenery. There's some collaborations on there, and again, it was very much people who I felt could bring something to the project. So I actually had an old school friend who my first ever band I was with, and I always thought, oh, you're such a good guitarist. And then we drifted apart and then reconnected. I discovered he was John Martin in the John Martin tribute band, and Richard Thompson in the Fairport Convention tribute band, and he'd become a session player, cool. Working with some very serious people like, Lee Hazelwood and Petula Clark, and confirmed everything. I always thought, you are a really good guitarist, and I thought, I'd really like a good guitarist on this record, so he played some really good slide guitar on it, and I needed some female vocals, so I got Frances McKee, who sings for the Vaselines, to do some really nice vocals. So I got people I thought could bring some great stuff to it, and there's this element of being a bit of a dictator, saying this is what I want, and you're the person. But there's hopefully a bit of freedom for these people as well. Yeah, and I think it is very much a two-way street, and certainly with this people get so loose that everyone did their thing, and it worked out well, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, how natural do you find that process of adopting a collaborator's hat? Because, as you say, there's a dictatorship to it, but then there's an element of slack and freedom. And I guess it's essentially your work at the end of the day, and it's how far do you let that slack go for the benefit of letting someone contribute what they want to?
Yeah, this is, but having said that, I do collaborations where it's an equal billing, and they're often duos, but yesterday I was in a recording studio, a rare event. I was in a recording studio, and we were doing some mixing of a disco project I've got going, which is a 4-piece, and it's, we're all very, I think, strong individuals in the 4-piece, and we all bring something very specific, and that is very much everyone brings something to it that no one else can bring. So we have Paul, who's the drummer, absolutely amazing sense of rhythm, and we've got a virtuoso double bass player in Michael, and then my artist friend Luke does a lot of the sound design in a way that I could never conceive, and it's sort of left to me to do, I guess, the melodies. So we each have our own field of expertise, and that works very well.
Wow. When is that due out? I would love to hear that.
We've done one 12-inch. It's on Night School Records. We record under the name of Amor, A-M-O-R. And the first 12-inch was called Paradise. You find it all over the internet. I'm sure you can find a link for the site. And we're doing another 12-inch to coincide with a September tour, and we were just mixing that 12-inch yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear all this. And what's great, I think, is the fact that you've already laid out 2 albums that you're working on, which sound completely opposite ends of a spectrum. I don't know, like very eclectic, and the choices that you've put to me for this crucial listening.
Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah, couldn't be more eclectic.
We've gone off the track. Just chatting. Yeah.
So I'm going to let you pick whatever order you want to put these forward, Richard. Whatever one you want to go for first. If you could tell me the name of it and why it's important to you.
Well, I'm sticking with my original order because nothing has changed since you first asked me. That's the philosophy I'm taking. So my first choice was Medal by Pink Floyd. And I have to say that if you put me on the spot and say, who is the most, or what is the most important band in your life? I would say Pink Floyd, for a number of reasons. First reason is they are the first band I ever heard. Now, the first record I ever heard outside of my parents' choice was See Emily Play. Now, I realise that's the Sid era Pink Floyd, which I love. The material's great. But I actually think Syd Barrett's solo albums are even better. And I also believe that Syd Barrett, in many ways, was held back by Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd were held back by Syd Barrett, because I feel they really took off. The era of Pink Floyd I love is the era after Sid had left. Not to, put down Sid at all. His solo albums, I think, are amazing, and I could have, on another day, chosen The Madcap Laughs by Syd Barrett as a crucial record in my life. But I chose Medal. I feel it's the peak of Pink Floyd in the era that I love. And the era of Pink Floyd I love is when they are not a song delivery mechanism. When Syd Barrett was in them for Piper at the Gates of Dawn, they were a mechanism to deliver the songs of Syd Barrett. Great songs. When they did Dark Side of the Moon, they became a mechanism to deliver the songs of Roger Waters. Less keen on his songs, I have to say. In fact, I don't really listen to them with any pleasure. But there was a sweet spot from Source of All of Secrets through to Medal, where they were just four guys making music. And that is the era of Pink Floyd I love. And Medal, I feel, is the really the peak of this period. You could argue for Live at Pompeii as well, which was made, I think, just before they sort of got into the Dark Side of the Moon sessions, and actually the film is intercut with bits of the recording of Dark Side of the Moon. But I'm not really interested in Dark Side of the Moon onwards. Medal is what we're talking about. Now, obviously I have an irrational love for Pink Floyd. It was the first music I ever heard outside my parents' taste. And also I grew up in Cambridge, and Pink Floyd are a real Cambridge band. Cambridge is based in the Fens. I actually grew up just outside of Cambridge in the Fens, and it's a very uneventful landscape, and I think Pink Floyd are a very uneventful band. In that peak era, there's no histrionics. They're just existing on a level plane. If there is an event in the music, it's a bit like a tree in the Fens. It's a major event. And Medal, it's a record of two sides. You've got on one side the songs, and they're not anything spectacular, the songs. What's important is the performance of the songs, and the performance of the songs isn't in any way spectacular either, and I think that's what's important. And probably if I had to pick one track on side one, it would be Pillow of Winds, which is the second track in. You've got your sort of blustering opening track, One of These Days, which is all fine and dandy, but then it goes into a very Floydian 5 or so minutes in Pillow of Winds. It's completely level. There's no drama. There's no real chorus in the song. There's no development in the song. It just, apart from maybe there's a bit of the very subtle percussion comes in at one point, but it's a very, I don't know if it's linear or non-linear, but it just is. It's just a state of being, this song, and that is something which I think has been very influential to me. I don't really like development in music. I like minimalist music a lot. I like things which just are in a state of being. So that's side one of Medal. Side two, you've got Echoes, which I think is quite transportative, and it's in lots of different sections. The sections don't essentially build. They're very much sort of hacked onto one another, and there are bits where you could argue, well, that's a build, but that's not really the importance of it. The importance is each self-contained module. It's quite a modular piece, I think, module of that side, and it features, for me, some of Pink Floyd's best music making. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant. Sorry, I just got on one there, but I was quite excited by it.
I did, yeah. If it's one of your favourite records, I think that's entirely excusable. But
oh, thanks.
It's been really interesting. I must actually disclose as well. So this is the fourth episode that I've recorded of this. The last one I recorded was with Lasse Maraug, which was a couple of weeks ago. He also picked Medal by Pink Floyd.
Really? Wow.
Isn't that interesting? And
What were his reasons?
So I think what was really interesting from him is he liked the imperfection of it. He liked the fact that Seamus really drove him up the wall.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's a complete non-entity of a track. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and
there's actually a version on Live at Pompeii where they're sort of like tickling a dog's sort of neck to get it to howl. It's really interesting. I think as well. I mean, he mentioned the fact that echoes. I think there seemed to be this real, almost duality for him. It seemed in the sense that there were these tracks where there was a lot of unremarkable moments, but I think echoes for him was very much just a piece of music that he really valued as music in a more traditional sense, in that it was a really exciting piece. That goes as well. It operates on so many levels, I feel, this record does. And that's possibly, why it's a record I've loved for a long period of time, and I could put it on at any moment and get something out of it. It doesn't tire.
I don't know how old you were when you first heard this record, but I know for me those first experiences in hearing a piece of music which played with duration and occupied duration in a way which was completely different to anything I'd ever heard before were some of the most formative experiences in my understanding of music and what I enjoyed. I mean, how old were you when you heard Echoes, and what was that like for you?
Well, I would say... I'd travel back a bit in time. When I first heard Pink Floyd, See Emily Play, I was about 6 or 7, and up to that point I hadn't heard really any pop music. I'd just heard sort of medieval recording music and choral music and maybe a bit of light classical. I was really quite sort of sheltered in that way. And then I heard See Emily Play, and I thought, wow, and there was a middle 8 where I could detect no tune in it whatsoever, the guitar solo bit, and I thought, this is it. This is why I'm on the planet, because of this. And then that's all. And I also heard that single and Arnold Lane, because a friend of mine they had those 2 singles in the house, but didn't have any other Pink Floyd. And then I moved from Cambridge and went to lived in Hertfordshire for a while, and I'd kind of forgotten about Pink Floyd a bit. And I remember a friend here, Dad had Animals and Medal and Relics, and I thought, oh wow, it's Pink Floyd. They're my favourite band. I really love those 2 singles, and the 2 singles were on Relics. And I got a tape of Animals and Medal, and if I'm absolutely honest, aged 11 I was at the time, I preferred Animals. And Medal was a slow burn for me. It took me a few years to actually find Medal exciting. Now the tables have turned. I can't listen to Animals. I think it's ghastly. It's really leaden and horrible. But Medal, and maybe I'm being a bit sort of, a bit, all or nothing there. But Medal is just gradually built and built and built for me. And so initially, I maybe aged 11, liking things like like the punk was in, and liking a bit more sort of up tempo music. Metal really didn't do it for me, apart from possibly the opening track. So I can't really pin down when it was or how it was, but it's been on the back burner, and it just became this thing for me.
It's a really interesting record to read about. I mean, I have to confess, I hadn't really digged into it until recording this podcast, and reading about the context in which it was made, and there seemed to be a sense of aimlessness upon which the record was born. Obviously there's no conceptual basis, which I think obviously mean you had this splay of directions, and some of which were followed, some weren't. Do you dig down into the context of these records as a way of, I guess, enlightening your understanding or renewing your appreciation? Is that an aspect of listening for you?
Not necessarily so much into the backstory of things, but it is interesting, and sometimes I wish I could clear my mind of any preconceptions and be in that state. Another record I could have chosen was Another Green World by Brian Eno, where apparently the first few days of the sessions, he was going over to using the oblique strategies. First few days of sessions, they got nowhere. It was just completely aimless and unusable. And I kind of like that idea that you're completely empty and devoid of of any direction, and somehow the direction finds you.
A cloud of eider down draws around me, softening the sound. Sleepy time when I lie with my love by my...
If you would like to introduce your second record, that would be fantastic.
Second record is Voice of America by Cabaret Voltaire. I first heard Cabaret Voltaire on the John Peel show, and it was that stereotypical thing, teenager with transistor radio under the bed sheets, not wanting to get found out that you're staying up late listening to this weird music. And I heard the track Obsession, and I thought, what? I don't even understand that music. What's going on there? And it was very tinny, and I could tell that the sonics weren't quite normal. And next time, I lived quite near London. Next time I went to London, I think I went with my parents. I don't know why we were going there. I went and tracked down a copy of Voice of America by Cabaret Voltaire, and I thought it was going to be good because I'd heard Obsession, and then I put on the first track, and it started off with an American voice going on about running up and down the aisles, and a very sinister, there's like undertone, and then this rhythm came in, and this echoed guitar, and my mind split open. It was just like, what is this? And the weird thing is, I'd been messing around with tape loops inside cassette shells, because I'd heard Revolution Number 9 by the Beatles, but this took it to a whole new level of tape loops and messing with sound and just things not being as I'd heard them previously. And it was all very well listening to the Stranglers and thinking it was a bit, edgy, but this was edgy in a totally different way, and it totally synced in with my, at the time, Cold War paranoia, where I wasn't sure if I was going to wake up in the morning because I thought we'd all be bombed to shit, and not really believing I'd ever make it into adulthood because the world would end through a mutually assured destruction, and I suddenly really regretted the fact that I was living quite a comfortable life in the home counties, and I wanted to be a bit more living in Sheffield, being a bit more industrial. I was just all a bit too suburban,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a record that opened up a lot of sonic possibilities for me, and realised that you didn't have to use the received notion of what sounds should be on a record. And obviously, there was a whole industrial orthodoxy about what records should sound like, and possibly for a while that did imprison me, but in the fullness of time, I think that was the record that opened up my mind to really the notion of any sound will go. You can make a record with any sound you want, and it's all right.
What's really interesting I found with this one is how there is still a weird framework of pop and metronomic coherence that seldom is overthrown, even at the peak of every sound being twisted and crunched and saturated.
Yeah,
they still want to dance.
They do, and they that's what they became once Chris Watson had left. They really became a dance outfit, and I got to say, I'm not really very interested in the dance music they made. I think there's a lot more interesting dance music, and sonically, I think they became a bit dull once Chris Watson had left. He was the guy who I feel brought them the interest, but at the same time, it was a sum of the parts. You needed Richard H. Kirk and Stephen Mallander's contribution to give that dance. They still wanted to dance, that dance element, and that, as you say, the metronomity. Is that the word? Yeah, sort of the metronome-like quality to a lot of the tracks. But that hey, we all like that. We want to dance. It's quite natural.
Yeah, I have to say as well. I mean, I didn't realise and this is maybe a bit poor on my part, that this was Chris Watson. I mean, I only really came into him through the latter stuff he's done, I suppose, on Touch and as a sound recordist. I was completely oblivious to his presence in this band.
Yeah, I think it's true that when he left Cabaret Voltaire, he went and worked for like Tyne Tees Telly or someone like that, as a sound recordist, which is great. I've got this picture of him going to the job interview. So Mr. Watson, if you like outline your experience and say, well, I'm in this industrial band we called Cabaret Voltaire. I can't imagine that really washing at a job interview these days.
It's interesting because it makes me think as well the amount of precision that he employs over what he does, and I wonder here listening to this record. I mean, I definitely feel like I'm on the outside looking in that there's something alien about what I'm hearing, and I think I perceive that as a sort of sonic recklessness, in that it's like I'm just going to abuse these sounds until I don't recognize what they look like anymore, or they don't resemble their instruments.
Yeah.
But I wonder with Chris whether actually there was a something that he was striving for that I just don't, I don't have the framework to comprehend. Yeah,
at the risk of sounding pretentious, I think it was very much of its time, and it did capture something about that era. I was as I said, I was really didn't think the world was going to survive. What with the Cold War, I thought we were all going to get blown up, and that's a common thing amongst people my age. We grew up in the 80s and really quite uncertain about the survival of the planet because of the Cold War. And there was an element of paranoia and dislocation to living, I feel, coupled with Thatcher's Britain, which wasn't particularly great either.
Right.
But it was dark times.
Yeah. I want to dig into that a bit more. I mean, what was what was it about this record that sort of ran in parallel to the experiences you were going through at that time? I mean, was it a solace, or was it sort of something you could see as a reflection of the sensations that you were harboring at that time?
Probably more of the latter than the former. But at the same time, there was an otherness to it, and that was more like it was just exciting. It was a thrill to feel maybe outside of yourself for a moment, because of the sound of it. It was transportative in a very different way from say like echoes on Meddle.
Yeah, I think it's the vocal performances as well. I think
deeply strange vocal performances,
aren't they? Yeah, and they feel like they're almost someone's voice being extracted out of their own head and sort of trying to float above their body a bit,
Yeah. Deeply strange. I mean, they've obviously affected the voice quite a bit in parts, but at the same time, you can, if you listen to the record before that, Mix Up, it's like more song orientated. That is, and you can kind of get a glimmer of what maybe Stephen Mallander's natural voice sounds like.
Yeah, because that's the thing, you never know.
Which is probably a very strange natural voice, yeah.
Yeah, and I love as well, I think, for me, and there are a few records that fall into this category where I realise that every sound can fall under question, that there can be consistency that doesn't exist within a particular batch of instrument tones, but that I guess the spirit of process is enough to congeal everything into a work that feels very cohesive, and that definitely feels like the case with this.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a sound world they're occupying there, and it does work as a whole, even though you could look at one track and say, well, it's nothing like that track, is it? But it's just so messed with the sound world that it all fits.
Final question on this one: where does this record sit with you now? I mean, I guess it sounds like it had a very intrinsic link with a time in your life. I mean, what is it like listening back to this record from the perspective of many years later?
I kind of think, where was I at? Because it's on one level, it's not a very pleasant record. It's like a nostalgia thing, perhaps. You know how, like, when you're young, you'd listen to music to, like, alienate your parents.
Yes.
I can put it on and feel like my younger self is putting on a record to alienate my older self. I feel like, I've moved on as a person, but at the same time, it was a very important record to me. And I could maybe choose another record from that period, which was important, and, something like, say, McCartney 2 by Paul McCartney, which I can, as like an old fart, I can sort of get a pleasure out of still in a different way. It seems like pop music to me, and at the time I was kind of quite into it because it was like weird pop music, but it never really meant quite as much to me as Voice of America at the time. But yeah, it's possibly I can see my younger self trying to alienate my older self.
And do you have a favourite track?
Probably the opening track, Voice of America, Damage is Done, with that echoey guitar.
Walls, doors, walls are gone. Time to recover. The damage is done.
Your final pick, please, Richard, and this one caught me completely off guard, but actually, as I found out later, in the best way.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Well, I'm going Purpose by Justin Bieber, and if I was completely honest, it's the record I have listened to most over the past year or so. It's a record. It's actually a CD that's in the car a lot, and it's family listening, and we all enjoy it. It's very much a modern digital record, and there is actually a really interesting video online where Skrillex, Bieber and Diplo take the viewer through the recording of Where Are You Now, which is my favourite track on the record, and I've got sort of particular thoughts on that track, actually. And I actually asked Solly, my son, yesterday, because I knew I was going to do this interview, what were your thoughts on Purpose? And he started by saying, well, it's very much a God record. Whoa. Which is not something that occurred to me at all.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. And so it's actually still opening up whole new perspectives to me, this record is. I'm not tiring of it. But the track that got me into it initially was Where Are You Now? And it is... my favourite bit of the whole album is the speeded up flute-like hook on Where Are You Now? You know the bit...
Yeah.
And Skrillex takes you through the creation of that. And it strikes me that we're at a moment in pop music where technology is doing things which are creating these sonic events. It's like the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. It's a riff made possible by technology. And initially it sounds wrong, but now it's, that the fuzz on dun, 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 on Satisfaction was wrong at the time, but now it's just mainstream. And I think likewise, we're getting these kind of digital artifacts which have now become mainstream. You can talk about glitch and all that, but it's become mainstream what you do with digital technology, and it's creating hooks, and the product. It does not sound like a production bore, but the production is phenomenal on that record. And if you really turn it up loud, you hear whole levels of stuff which you aren't necessarily aware of when you're just being exposed to the mere hook of that. But there are other tracks I really like as well, and what I particularly like is the way they've taken the voice and created instrument parts out of the voice through digital manipulation. And obviously it's on one level quite passé, because everyone's doing it now. But I think there's a quality there's a reason why it's popular. It's not just the Bieber vehicle. It's the fact that they've managed to make hooks which are incredibly powerful, and they've done them in a sonic way which kind of hits that sweet spot between sounding surprising and sounding familiar. And it is a record full of very enjoyable, good tunes.
Yeah, I mean, how did it come into your life? Who brought it into the car?
Well, Sawley, my son. He being he's 10 years old. It's I guess it's probably about I'm trying to find a time scale on this, but it's been there for a while. It was on release. It was very much the buzz at school that there was this record, this new Bieber record. Can't say I particularly appreciate some of his earlier work, is what it is, but I think that this record, maybe it was an attempt to become a bit more a serious artist, but it's weird because Bieber fever kind of swept our household, and I ended up watching a documentary. He's a bloody good drummer, Justin Bieber is. I don't know if you're aware of this.
No.
Yeah, he's really good. Watched a documentary where they showed a film of him drumming in like a church band, aged 5, 6. Phenomenal.
Wow.
You just don't think that he has got the talent, but he really does have talent, this guy. In fact, I thought maybe I should write, because I know quite a few drummers, and if I feel really good drummers, I was going to write to him and say, Justin, how about resurrecting your drumming career?
Wow.
It's an art project I've got going, but he's so you kind of got to know quite a bit. And actually, Sawley went to see Bieber on the Purpose tour. I didn't go. Tickets were a bit expensive, so it was only really one adult could go. But he came back as mind blown.
Wow.
So he led the way, but I think we all enthusiastically embraced it. It was just good fun.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is the premise of listening to music in the car as a family, or
everything's very hyped in the car. The bass comes up, the treble comes up, it's all compressed so you don't miss a thing. And in many ways that's kind of how record production's gone. Bass hyped, top hyped, and everything leveled out and limited so you don't miss a thing. So it's kind of it's a weird sound world.
Have you done it on headphones as well?
No, I haven't actually. I don't really like headphones, I've got to say.
Oh, okay. How come?
I prefer speakers as a listening means. Occasionally I mix using headphones just to check there's no sort of clicks and things here and there. But maybe that will open up a whole new world of Purpose by Justin Bieber if I listen to it on headphones.
Yeah, well, I because I listened to it in the car. I thought I wanted to entirely live the Richard Young's experience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Talking to the imaginary kids in the back, and I felt it's. I mean, it feels like a driving record in a way, in that it is just very visceral and hard, and it feels appropriate to be in a hurtling motor vehicle at the time. But on headphones, I think there's, I think what you were saying there is a lot of very subtle layers that are sort of threaded through the margins of it, which maybe under the revs of the engine were perhaps drowned out. I was like, oh wow! So actually, there's because
I've listened to it outside of the car, but not in headphones. Yeah.
Because it's quite a spacious record. Like, at least to begin with, like the first few tracks feel quite restrained, I guess. Like there's a lot of bass.
Yeah,
but
I think it's got a really strong beginning, which dips when you get that track, which has got, I think, Ed Sheeran's guitar in it, and it's got a kind of like a trumpet solo. The opening sort of salvo is great. Then it dips, and then it's that thing. They haven't shot their load because Where Are You Now is still to come.
That
is the peak for me. And even after that's gone, there's still something there, but. It's also, you've got to bring it down at the end, so you want to go back to the start. But they've definitely thought about the sequencing of it, even though we live in like in an MP3 shuffle world.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I definitely felt that when that song came on. I mean, what is it, like, it's track 8 or something like that, is it? It's quite a way in.
Yeah, it's fair in, yeah, I don't really look at the numbers, but yeah, it's quite a way in, yeah.
But you're right, it's quite remarkable that there's an overarching restraint that's just holding that record back over the course of several tracks. Yeah, it's just not a load of ideas thrown together.
Oh no.
But what do you think of what about the lyrical content? I mean, do you dwell on that much? I mean, it seems quite interesting.
I, on the whole, don't listen to words. I mean, I listen to sort of the timbre and the enunciation, but I don't really sort of take in the meaning when I listen to music, though I do like a good lyric. My impression is the lot of it sounds like therapy.
Yes.
The lyrics, which is probably a great way to write sort of soulful style lyrics, is to go into therapy. And maybe it ties in with what Solly said last night. Oh, it's a God record. There was. I remember reading years back in Forced Exposure magazine a review of a singer-songwriter where Byron Coley, I think it was, said that the lyrics were overly self-referential, which I thought was a great phrase. And there's possibly an aspect of that. They are a bit overly self-referential. But, I think that goes with the territory of the genre. You're not going to, write something sort of distant and drifty like Pillow of Winds, to go back to Echo, Medal by Pink Floyd. It is all about me and my relationship to the world and maybe you and our relationship. But I haven't I'm not really into dissecting lyrics too much.
No, fair enough. To be honest, I'm not either. And then when I was listening to it for this podcast, I said to my friend, I was like, I'm listening to this album, and I've never, because I think of my hang-ups as a music listener, would have completely passed this by. And I just said, I think it's worth checking out, and I think he's so much more lyrically minded, but immediately was like, I reckon this was recorded at a time of maybe a lot of strain in terms of his relationship with the public. And totally. That's kind of very blatant in maybe some of the earlier tracks on the record. Like Mark My Words. That's kind of, you look at that, I guess. There's that going on. Yeah, because I know there's certain points where he seems to be saying, I'm really sorry for how I've been, but actually I've been all right as well, and give me some credit. I was, I'm an all right guy, really, which I find really interesting. He kind of goes into this sort of state of please accept my apology, and then comes out of and also remember I'm kind of an all right guy as well. I'm not completely this horrible chap. But,
yeah.
It's great. I'm glad you've put me onto it, Richard. This is going to be certainly on my playlist. I mean, one.
Yeah. Have you seen that online thing where so I think it's on the New York Times website. It's about a 6-minute video where they go through the making of it.
No, I haven't.
I'd really recommend it. Yeah. If you just put Skrillex, Diplo, Bieber, New York Times, that should get you it. Definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, because I mean, Skrillex seems to be involved in a lot of music of this type, and I get the impression that he's perhaps a forerunner in, as you say, digital pop at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he's the way he works Ableton is phenomenal in this clip, and I could never envisage being able to be that much of a virtuoso with software.
The other question I wanted to ask about car music is, I mean, I think it's a really interesting place for listening, not only for the in terms of the fact you're listening on speakers, but also that if you are listening as a family, you're I guess what's one of those rare occasions where you're in each other's company and there's no option to up and leave if you don't like what's being listening to. So there has
absolutely.
to be.
Yeah. Oh, Dad. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you negotiate that as a family in terms of choosing what goes on in the car?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons we've listened to this the most is it's a record we all like. There will be records that one of us likes and the others don't, and they get played, but I think it's that thing you sense that others aren't enjoying it, so hey, that's not really fair on them, so let's stick to something that's pleasurable for all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me and my partner, I think we've tried doing the alternation thing where you're like, you get a track, I get a track.
We've done that, yes. Yeah. But sometimes you kind of feel like a minute into your choice, they're not really enjoying this, are they? Should we just move on to something else? Even though I'd really love to hear this, and yeah, it does go on for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or there's that thing where boring parents say, Solly, you've got to really listen to this. This is a very important record. And you just know that you're just sounding, just so old and just self-important. It's not good.
Yeah, I often try and put something on in the car and that I think my partner will like, and then just not even say, hey, what do you think of this? But just wait quietly and casually for some kind of remark, as if I'm just oozing music recommendations without having to bring it up. But she never says anything, and we end up playing Radiohead again because that's our Venn diagram
default
of our lives. Yeah, that's the one that falls down the center.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's how it goes.
Where are you now that I need you?
So, Richard, this has been excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
No, that's been a pleasure. It's been fun. I should actually go and create some breakfast here.
Of course,
move on through the day. Yeah.
Yes, waiting patiently. But if people want to find your music online or see what you're up to, where should they be headed to?
If you go to www.nofansrecords.com, you should find most stuff there. It's my official website. That will take you to the Facebook, it'll take you to the Bandcamp, it'll take you to my online shop, it'll take you to a few sort of video clips of live performances. It's the works. It's a website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and to everyone listening, thank you as well. I'll see you soon.